Excellent. So thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to Grand Rounds at Verily. And today is a very important day for us. Today is a day to think about our mission, which I know drives everything that we do. We know our mission is to make the world's health information useful so that people can enjoy healthier lives. And I know that all of us work incredibly hard. We keep our heads down, but if we keep our eyes on this mission, then I think we're ultimately going to end up really affecting people's lives and try to make a difference that we are trying to make every day. The question is, how do we actually achieve our mission? And as I look around the room and I see all of the different teams that come together, this is a very special place that's got groups of people figuring out how do you collect the next generation of information. This information may be digital information. We were talking about that earlier with Michael. It may be molecular information. And we have the latest and greatest technologies that we can deploy. It then becomes very important to organize this information. Information that just lives in silos doesn't actually change care, it doesn't help people. And so the most important thing is how do we activate this information, get it into the hands of people, patients, providers, and health systems. And if we do that, then we will achieve our mission. Now, the reason that we're starting Grand Rounds at Verily is it's part of a big effort to make sure that we understand our users. And it's exciting today that we're going to be kicking off this particular event. And I'll hand it over to Bill to give you some background.
Thanks, Jess. Well, welcome to the inaugural Grand Rounds at Verily. Woo! As Jess said, the intent of these sessions is really to connect us all with the patients, researchers, and clinicians that are a part of our lives. And I know that many of you don't always have the opportunity to hear from the patient's voice. So on a quarterly basis, we'll bring in patients so we can hear their real-life stories, understand their unmet needs, and hopefully that'll really help us stay connected to our mission. Each session, each quarter, we'll have a different topic. Today, the topic is Parkinson's disease, and 2017 marks the 200th anniversary of James Parkinson's first description of the disorder. I think it's fair to say that maybe in the next 20 years, we may make as much progress in Parkinson's as have been made in the first 200. And I think we can contribute to that. Parkinson's disease is a common neurodegenerative disorder. It's second only to Alzheimer's disease in prevalence. It affects about 1 million Americans, 10 million people worldwide. Most people think of Parkinson's disease as a movement disorder, problems with slowness of movement, stiffness of muscles, shaking, difficulty with gait and balance. But it's really a multi-system disorder that affects so much more and causes many symptoms for patients. Difficulty regulating blood pressure, difficulty with sleep, depression, anxiety, gastrointestinal issues, and many other issues. So it really is a multi-system disease, and I think one that we're up to the challenge of tackling here at Verily. Many of you are aware of our emerging efforts in Parkinson's, but I wanted to highlight why Parkinson's disease makes sense for us to care about and work on. Certainly, there are still knowledge gaps, as I think you'll hear from our guests, that we can really help fill. Characterizing the disease better, understanding how we measure the progression of the disease or the response to treatments, and we can all contribute to that. And as we study this disease, it will simultaneously help us build out our capabilities in systems biology, in wearable sensors, in algorithm development, and so forth. So it's really quite a nice match for our mission, I think. Some of the specific programs that we have, just so you're aware, the new Study Watch is being used in our Parkinson's study in the Netherlands and perhaps in other studies to come. We think this will be very useful for tracking movement and function during the patient's normal daily activities. We also have liftwear, of course, and liftwear can be useful to cancel out tremor that may interfere with feeding from Parkinsonian tremor. And now with the liftwear steady device can help dyskinesia the involuntary movements that medication can cause in Parkinson's disease. And then the Parkinson Opmat, that's the Dutch version of the Personalized Parkinson Project, which is our longitudinal cohort study that we're kicking off in the Netherlands with the goal of really understanding in a deep way what Parkinson's is to advance treatments. So I think a very interesting and important disorder that we care about, and we are extremely excited to have members of the Michael J. Fox Foundation to help us better understand Parkinson's disease and learn what it's like in terms of the impact on daily life. For those who are not familiar with the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's research, in its short history, they say the only constant of the organization has been its unflagging commitment to finding a cure for Parkinson's disease and put itself out of business. Michael was saying earlier that he wanted to go into business to go out of business. They launched the foundation in 2000. It quickly grew from a startup to the world's largest nonprofit funder of Parkinson's drug development. They've allocated more than $700 million since the inception of the organization. The New York Times has called the foundation the most credible voice on Parkinson's research in the world, and it's widely being considered at the forefront of innovation. They've established a peer-level group of neuroscientists who prioritize, manage, and troubleshoot their research portfolio, and they are sponsoring a landmark biomarker study called PPMI. Most recently, the foundation has also formally integrated policy and advocacy into their work as well. So a very impressive organization. I've had the privilege of working with them pretty much since their inception. Well, let's bring out our guests. Actually, our first guest is already in the audience. Debbie Brooks is the co-founder of the foundation. Michael's employee number one, I think they call you. And presently the executive vice chairman of the organization. Let's have a round of applause for Debbie. And then we're going to bring to the stage Todd Sherer. Todd is the chief executive officer of the foundation. Todd is formally trained as a neuroscientist, and he now directs the organization's research strategy, as well as responsible, of course, for the overall scientific and fundraising efforts. Todd, great to see you. I think we're going to have you sit over there. Now, Todd and I go back a ways, but the cool thing is that I didn't realize until I read your bio is that you received a grant from the foundation in 2003, and so he was a grant recipient and then came in-house to gradually assume increasing responsibilities and now is the CEO of the organization. So great to have you here.
Thanks, Bill.
And then our very special guest, Michael J. Fox. It does seem a little superfluous for me to provide a formal introduction, but I will provide a very brief one. As you know, he is an actor, producer, and author, and of course an advocate. They say you burst onto the scenes with iconic roles. Alex P. Keaton from NBC's Family Ties, Marty McFly in the Back to the Future trilogy, and he's continued to thrill audiences as recently as The Good Wife with his portrayal of Lewis Canning. But he's also a best-selling author, and he's written 3 books. Is that right, 3?
3,
Yep.
2.5.
3.5.
2.5.
Lucky Man, a memoir. Always Looking Up, The Adventures of an Incurable Optimist. And A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Future, Twists and Turns and Lessons Learned. I think you can tell a lot just about the focus there. He was diagnosed with Parkinson's in 1991 at the age of 29 and disclosed his condition to the public in 1998. Ultimately went on to fund the foundation in 2000. So warm welcome again for Todd and Michael. Thanks to you both for being here. It's really, really kind of you to come and help our employees understand Parkinson's disease. You know,
I'm honored to be here. I just want to say, I've said to a couple of people, but I always think when I'm with a group like this, I think, your parents must be so disappointed. It's become nothing.
well, you know what's been interesting, Michael, is when word leaked out that you might be visiting us, I had a number of people come up to me and tell me that you were their hero, their idol. And I had to sort of smile because as a neurologist taking care of Parkinson's patients for the last 20 years, they feel the same way about you, that you've been their hero and idol. And I just wondered, did you ever think you'd be in that kind of a role?
No, I didn't think, I didn't see it through. It's kind of like when I got into acting, this was a thing that felt good to me, and so I did it, and it turned out. But when I was diagnosed with Parkinson's, my first thought wasn't other people. My first thought was, what the hell happened to me? What am I going to do? And it took about 7 years for me to work that all out. And then what happened was once I accepted that, and I've said to people that acceptance is my happiness grows in direct proportion to my acceptance and inverse proportion to my expectation. If I could just accept what my situation is, then I can nuance it, and I can be honest about it, and I can move forward. And also I became part of a community, and there were other people and that they were in the same situation I was, and they had thoughts and feelings that were similar to mine, and goals and hopes that were similar to mine. And I thought the only difference is I'm in this unique position. I'm in this position where people know me and have a predisposition toward me, whether it's good or bad, and mostly good, which was nice. And so I thought, I have an opportunity here, and I kind of have a responsibility here to do something, and so the foundation was born. But the gratitude that you say that people express toward me and those feelings, they're completely mutual. I mean, I'm so inspired by people that have this, and they're in a tougher position than I am, and they deal with it daily, and I feel honored that they've entrusted me with their hopes and their dreams of being rescued.
Well, you've already gotten pretty personal, and I wanted to go back in time back to the first symptoms. What were you experiencing?
Well, I was doing a movie in Florida called Doc Hollywood, and I woke up in the morning and had a twitching pinky, and I was out that night before with Woody Harrelson was on the movie, and that's always bad news. and so we kind of ripped up Gainesville. We were in a college town with Woody Harrelson in the college town. It's all bad. So I woke up the next morning and I had this twitching pinky, and I couldn't stop it. It just kept twitching, and so I went to neurologist on campus.
Right away?
Yeah, I went
Wow.
the next day to see where because I thought I'd hit my own and he said, the guy said it was my thoracic, that it was some pull, and he completely missed the boat. But there's no symptoms with early onset that really tell you. And you're a 29-year-old guy, he's not thinking Parkinson's. So then about a year later, I found myself in a neurologist's office because I'd gone to a physical therapist who said, this is neurological. So I went to a neurologist's office, and I did the battery of tests. Still today, we haven't got biomarker, we haven't got a way to identify it. So you do this drunk driving test, and which I failed, and then he sat me down and said, you have Parkinson's. You have Parkinson's disease, and you have 10 years left to work. And it was just wham. And it took me a long time to. I remember going outside, leaving the doctor's office, and it was just this rainy day in New York, and I just thought, what the hell just happened? And I have to confess, I had feelings like, don't you know who I am? You can't pronounce that I have Parkinson's. It's not in the script. And so that was beginning my journey.
Must have been a stunning thing to hear.
it was pretty shocking. And I told my wife, I came home, told my wife, and it just was like, we had a young son. He's 27 now, but he was really young, and it just we didn't know what the future held. But I've always been, if not optimistic, I tend to look at things positively, and I knew that there was something in there all the way along the first few years. I knew that there was something that there's possibility in here, and there was opportunity to change the way I looked at things, at the very least, in adapting to it, and something good might come of that.
Were you treated with medication right away once the diagnosis
I
was
was
given?
given medication, but I treated it like Smarties. I just threw it in my pocket. If I was feeling twitchy, I'd pop a pill, and I really did it haphazardly, and had dyskinesia as a result. I had big swaying movements.
Even early on.
Yeah. From the drugs that I was taking too much.
Yeah.
And because I didn't educate myself about the disease. And then about 4 or 5 years in, I started to really talk to my doctor, and I kind of went, this isn't going away. I haven't changed toothpaste and all of a sudden been better and gone, oh, it was the toothpaste all along. I knew that I was in it, and I had to educate myself about it, and so I did. And so that brought me to a place where before I started the foundation, I was in Washington testifying about the need for funding, and I talked to doctors who said the science is ahead of the money. And they kept saying to me, the science is ahead of the money. And I thought, well, that's what I want. I chase the science. I mean, it's not kind of a flip on the Watergate thing. It's not follow the science, follow the money, and the money will follow the science. And so that kind of got into my head, and I just knew that I needed to treat this like a business and treat it like our goal is to go out of business, and we need to look at it from a scientific point of view, from a business point of view, from an academic point of view, from a patient point of view, and we managed to do that.
Before you went public, you had a thalamotomy, right?
Yeah, but before I went public.
And thalamotomy is a very precise therapeutic lesioning procedure of the area of the brain that's generating the tremor.
It's 20th century trepanning.
How did you decide to do that? Or
I had huge symptoms on my left side, and I was doing a show called Spin City, and I was finding myself doing scenes where I was sitting on my hands because it just wouldn't stop, and it just was. I mean, everything I did was, I was acting and I was doing my job, but I was also involved in misdirection and sleight of hand and just finding ways to lean on desks and to because my tremor, if I did something, it would rest. So if I moved this, so I would be doing a scene and I would just do that for no reason. And so I talked to some neurologists and I said we can diminish the tremor on that side by doing the small incision in your thalamotomy, in your thalamus. It's called a thalamotomy, and so I did it and it worked.
it helped?
But then it started on my right side. So I wasn't going to go back in again, and it was a stopgap measure that I don't know that I would do it again, but I don't resent the fact that I did it. I don't resent the doctors that did it. I don't regret it, but I wouldn't do it again because they're gonna. I mean, next time they want my brain, they're gonna have it figured out.
Todd, you're a neuroscientist. How did you become interested in working on Parkinson's disease?
I was fooled into working in Parkinson's disease because at the time when I was in graduate school, and still one of the common theories in Parkinson's is that there's really a selective loss of a very specific population of cells in the brain that produce dopamine in the substantia nigra. And at the time of diagnosis, it's believed that already 80% or so of those cells have degenerated before the symptoms start. So as a naive graduate student, I thought, well, it wouldn't be so hard to just save 10% of these cells, and then we'd have cured Parkinson's. And of course, we know it's much more complicated than that, but just sort of the academic challenge of that drew me into this to really, seems to me a very solvable disease if we can push the science and fund the right science.
And so you were a grant recipient of the foundation just a few years into its creation, and then how did you end up becoming staff?
It's really hard being a grant recipient to the foundation. It's much easier being the grant giver. But actually, one of the things that really impressed me when I had my grant was that the foundation's very focused on accountability. And as having a fellowship from the foundation, I still had to come in and report on what I actually used the money for, which is not actually that common in the granting industry. And what was really exciting about that is I actually got to meet the other grant recipients. And it really improved my research and it developed this network, and I got access to new tools. And it got me really excited about this new way of funding and pushing research forward. And at that time, when Michael and Debbie were expanding the activities to look to bring on internal scientists, and to have that opportunity to have this broad impact across the whole disease rather than just be focusing on your one molecule or your one project was really exciting to me.
Michael, can you describe a typical day with Parkinson's disease, if there is such a thing?
Well, I don't have any typical days.
Yeah.
But in general, I mean, I don't go to work at the same place every day. So I never know what to expect on any given day, and I might have commitments or responsibilities, and I'll titrate my medication according to what I have to do. I don't take pills at 9 o'clock and at 11:30. I have kind of areas that and some days I feel better if it's, I mean, I come to California, I feel a lot better than I feel in New York. High pressure is better for me than low pressure. Humidity is tough for me. If I eat protein, it's tough for me. So I'm always doing different things. But typical days I get up and I literally, someone once said to me that it used to be the hero's journey was to slay the dragon and save the princess. But for me, the hero's journey is putting one foot in front of the other and getting out of bed. And literally, since I've had this problem with gait and with falling, I literally get up and think, okay. And it's again, you look at things differently, and I look at that as an incredible gift. I look at that as to live that metaphor is so rewarding and enlightening. It just opens you up to everything, because it really is about that step, and I don't know what to expect after that. I can head her into the toilet and crack my head open. So and that's a possibility. And the next moment, so I get through it and I don't do that, then that's a success. I can build on that. And that's my day is, a typical day is just building on relationships and being open to my family and how they react to it, and realizing it affects them too. And again, this feeling that, and this understanding that no one dies from Parkinson's. You die with Parkinson's. And so I'm living with Parkinson's, and my family's living with it too. And so I respond to how they react, and I respond to how I'm feeling, and just that's why this work is so rewarding, because it gives me a feeling of usefulness, and that I'm doing something productive.
It's really common for people with Parkinson's to talk about how difficult it is in the morning since they've gone all night without medication. Do you find you can count on your meds once you have taken them?
Yeah, but I play this game and keep away with them. I like to forestall it as well as I can. But
Why is that?
just because it'll go, because I can, if I can bump up, if I don't have to take it at 8, and I take it at 9:30, then I don't have to take it till 2, then I'm good into the evening. Mm-hmm. It's funny to be, I try not to be a prisoner to it. Mm-hmm. I try to be, to have it be a living relationship between me and my treatment, that it's give and take.
Right.
And and you play games that, like I was saying to someone earlier, when I go to my doctors and my movement disorder specialist, and she's doing, this is kind of comes in with this information devices that you guys are working on. I go in and she has a list of questions about how I'm doing, and she has a graph from 1 to 5, 0 to 5. So I instinctively want to get those zeros, which means I don't have the symptom that she's talking about.
Typical overachiever, right?
But I do have the symptoms. But I say, I met up, so I'm really in good shape, and I do my walking really well, and I do all my stuff really well, and she's like, "You're great," and I'm like, "Not really." but
And this is a key point. What you're pointing out is the snapshot that the doctor gets in the office doesn't necessarily reflect what's going on.
It's anecdotal, and we are in many ways the best reporters of our situation, of our condition, but in other ways we're not, because it's just pure humanity, human instinct to want to be the best you can be at any given moment. So the idea that there's a device that you can just hand to your doctor, and he or she gets the complete rundown of what your day, your week, your month has been, how your movement is responding to medication, how much rest you need, and I mean it's an amazing thought that you can turn your experience into information that helps people that are in a position to do something about it.
Question for you. People may notice a little bit of the writhing movement that you have,
Yeah.
the dyskinesia.
Comment
on what that's like and what it's all about?
I mean, moments when you're the focus of attention get you twitchy. So it's a reaction to the medication. There's a drug that I take for it called amantadine, which is a found drug, like many drugs that treat diseases that don't have cures or therapies that pretty much resemble a cure. And so amantadine was a drug that was used for old people that had the flu. And it happens to diminish dyskinesias, but it's kind of harsh on you. And I mean, after a while you see spiders in the corner and stuff moving that isn't there. So it's a trade-off with everything. You try to do as little of that as possible. I mean, I could get myself still, but it would be at the expense of my articulation and my.
Todd, I think Michael's bringing up one of the clinical issues is the motor fluctuation, the trying to balance the good function without being too slow or too dyskinetic. Are there efforts that the foundation has supported to try to help with some of these day-to-day symptomatic needs?
Yeah, there's a lot of research going on in this area. One of the main areas is to just see if we can get a better standard delivery of the medication, so that Michael was talking before about how he's trying to time his medication throughout the day to have the optimal benefit. But there's a lot of research to just try to see if you could reformulate the medication, either with a patch delivery or more rapid onset delivery, just so you can get a more continuous, consistent, more predictable day. And a lot of that is driven by the disease, but also by how your body is handling this medication.
One comment that Michael made was repurposing drugs, and I think it's been really brilliant what one of your programs has done, if you wanted to describe that.
Yeah, this is a big effort, not just in Parkinson's, but an effort we focused on, which is there's a lot of commonalities in the underlying biological mechanisms across disease. And you could take advantage of some of the innovations that have been made to develop molecules or compounds in other diseases and now apply and test them in Parkinson's. Right now, there's a large trial going on looking at blood pressure medication as actually a treatment for Parkinson's, because the same calcium channels are involved in the nervous system. So there's a lot of efforts. This is the whole point of this is to try to short circuit some of the slowness of the drug development pipeline and take advantage of existing treatments and apply them to the disease.
And Michael, was that your intent in creating the foundation to find new drugs or find a cure or all the above? Or
it started out to find a cure, but then we realized that there's no pathways to the cure. There's all kinds of silos, but there are very few throughways, pipelines, and so as we evolved, we found ourselves with a whole new issue, which was finding drugs and therapies and improving what was there, and incentivizing drug companies to take us on, because we had 1 million, we're a relatively small population of sufferers or people that have it, and so we'd have a drug company, and we'd say, working on a compound that interested us, and we'd lend give a multi-billion-dollar corporation $5 million to keep their eye on the ball, and then we some situations with big follow-on funding once those results were good. And it was just that, I mean, I credit these guys with it. They came up with it, and it's been amazing, our relationship with pharma, who I always kind of thought of as bad guys. But we've found a way to work with them and have good results.
Have the goals of the foundation changed from when you first envisioned it to what you think is important now, or do you feel there's a certain constancy there?
Well, I just didn't think, I didn't see that we would do so much just finding new ways to approach it. And I thought it was you find scientists and you fund them. But it's bigger than that. It's finding scientists and knowing what you want from them. And that's one of the reasons they talk about accountability. I remember saying in early meetings, we're going to give this guy $2 million and he's not going to come and tell us what he's doing. I mean, I want to give him a report card. I want to withhold funding if it's not going in the direction that we expected.
So this philosophy came from the top, it sounds like.
Well, I'm like Chauncey Gardner, and being there, I just kind of spout. No endowment, money comes in, money goes out, or just like little koans, and the Deb translates into policy.
Yeah, no, this is fascinating. So you said money comes in, money goes out. There was no endowment. You raise the money each year and you spend it.
Yeah, I mean that's what it's there for.
Yeah.
It's that we don't want to like sit on a pile of money. I mean it's not doing anybody any good. So it goes in, it goes out, and science is ahead of the money, and I can't think of a million others, but so I just kind of feel confident that we're going in an innovative direction, and we're doing it in a new way, which is what all of you are about.
Speaking of innovative directions, Todd, can you give us a sense of the scope of work that the foundation has supported and is supported over the years?
Yeah, so I mean, we leave no stone unturned, but we are focused on really developing new treatments. A lot of this is now coming out of really novel genetic discoveries. Parkinson's in the past wasn't thought to have much of a genetic component, but we're now uncovering a lot of the molecular biology and underlying science to develop new treatments. So there's a lot of work the foundation does to build that knowledge base around these new targets and directions and early drug discovery. And more importantly, now we're doing additional work on really how we're going to go and test these therapies to see if they're actually working. Michael was talking about the exam that is done that involves tapping your nose and tapping your feet, and then the doctor gives you a 1 or a 2. This is the whole basis of a multi-million-dollar clinical trial is based on those outcomes. So there's a big effort the foundation has on trying to improve the outcome measures that could be used in trials, both biologically and clinically, with some more of the objective measures. And the other thing that I think is important is to get a better handle on really the natural history of the disease and the variability of the disease that the foundation's working on. You asked Michael what his typical day is. There's also not a typical Parkinson's patient. So you have varied patients having varied types of days. So we need to make more sense of this again so we could really understand how the drugs are working. And that's a big effort the foundation has. This baseline that then all the companies and all the drug developers can build on top of.
This is PPMI you're referring to.
PPMI,
Can you
right.
just talk a little bit more about what PPMI is?
Yeah, so PPMI is the Parkinson's Progression Markers Initiative. That is a large-scale natural history study of Parkinson's and people at risk for developing Parkinson's. It's in 35 sites throughout the world and has rigorous clinical data, biological data that's collected, genetics, neuroimaging, and it's developed as an open platform, so all the data is made available in real time. It's a collaborative between the academics and the pharmaceutical companies that is spearheaded through the foundation. And the goal of this is to really establish a new framework for how we would do clinical trials, particularly trials of drugs that would slow the disease. We talked before about treatments that could reduce some of the symptoms, but ultimately we want a treatment that can slow the progress of the disease. And in that case, we need to have a better understanding of how the disease is actually progressing, both clinically and biologically.
We're going to open it up for questions soon, but I wondered, Todd, if you had thoughts about what an organization like Verily might contribute to advancing the field. As you know, this is a room full of hardware engineers, software engineers, computational biologists, clinicians, clinical researchers, and so many more types of people, basic scientists. What can we do to help?
Yeah. I think the work that can be done here would be fundamental to how we can change our potential for developing transformative treatments for Parkinson's. We now are in a position where we have an ability to collect a vast amount of data from people with Parkinson's at the extent never before. And if you think about the study I just talked about, the PPMI initiative, we have whole genome sequencing, we have brain imaging, we have proteomics, RNA sequencing, clinical data, all being collected over time. We would love to have obviously more objective clinical data, so using technology to track the course of a day, so it's not just that half hour with a doctor to get the clinical sense, but then how are we going to utilize all of this information and data to make sense of the disease? So we have the input happening. How do we now sort of make that output, the analytics, and really the innovation on that information? And I think the kind of personnel that are here feed into all of those components that are critical to really take Parkinson's from 1817 to 2017.
I agree. I'm going to wrap up my questions with two of them, and I have a feeling you're going to want to answer them with the optimistic answer last. So I'll start with the more pessimistic one. What have you been frustrated by? What hasn't really materialized in the last 10, 15 years?
Well, I mean, a cure. But I was talking to the guys earlier that work on the liftware and devices that help Parkinson's patient live on a day-to-day basis and just be normal, feel normal. So the liftware is spoons that neutralize tremor and it's really great stuff. And I was saying earlier that issues that I deal with, this walking issue, it's called fascination, where your footsteps get so synchronized that you get to a point where you're frozen and then you tip over like a tree. There's nothing you can do about it. But there are tricks you can do, counting or having your shoulders back and making big steps. But it's just all this thinking you have to do all the time to do this. And so that's all you do. And I have a hallway in my house where I go around a corner and there's a door to the hallway. There's a door to my closet, which is just around the thing, and then the door to my office, which is next door. So I have to work up these doors. And I had to put tape down on the floor so I could step over the tape. So it would remind me to take a step and to not get shoveled and fall out of the closet. And my wife said, I really love you, but can we get rid of the friggin' tape? And I said, I can't. I'll wipe out. And that, to me, seems like a simple thing to some way deal with, to look down and create a beam for yourself that's discreet and invisible to anyone else, and you step over it. I mean, it's the kind of stuff you guys do. Just to re-alter the reality in a way that you can function, and short of a cure, that kind of stuff would be really valuable and really important.
You talked about some of your frustrations. On the flip side, what are you most proud of in terms of your work in Parkinson's advocacy?
Well, I'm just a happy guy. I just look at life as endless opportunity, and I wake up every day curious, and I think that's as important as anything. To wake up every day and say, what is this day going to bring me? What is this day going to bring us? What are the possibilities in this day? And what are outcomes I might see? Again, I live in acceptance and not an expectation, but acceptance isn't resignation. It's just acknowledging the truth and being empowered by it.
I think we have time for some questions, so we'd love to open it up to the audience. We have some microphones in the center aisle. Feel free to ask questions of Michael, Todd, Debbie.
Hi, how are you? I'm Vanessa. I'm in the science team. I work with microbiome, and I had a couple questions not related to microbiome. And so, in diabetes, right, we have a pump, and you have the glucose monitor, and so you can kind of titrate your insulin treatment depending on your glucose in your blood. So I was wondering if you could titrate the treatment depending on your physical symptoms. So if you had, like, for example, this watch that is monitoring your movements through the day, would that inform how you would titrate your therapy? And on that note, what are the challenges of using things like the equivalent of an insulin pump or a patch for therapy, giving therapy to the patients? Todd and Michael.
Okay. So I'll start, and Bill could help too. So I think first the answer is in terms of having an objective measure and titrating your medicine, the answer would be a goal. One of the challenges we have is in the diabetes example, you're actually measuring a real-time biologic impact of the drug. So that is a need in Parkinson's still to understand more of the biology and have a biomarker. But we could use an objective measure of the motor symptoms. And if the patient could start to identify when they think their medication's starting to wear off, objectively, they could actually preemptively take the medicine so that instead of a patient maybe going like this during the day with their medicine, if you could kind of see, I'm about to go off, take your pill, so as that kicks in, you never hit that trough. I think that is a real possibility with the technology. In terms of the delivery of the drug, the real challenge with the pumps have been just the biochemistry of levodopa, which is the medicine that the patients use, the dosing that's needed, and being able to formulate enough of it into a pump that would sort of last the entirety of the day. And that is, there's projects that are working on that now. But so I think there's a lot of parallels, just more research would be needed to get to the implication of that.
Do you really want to screw around with all that stuff? I mean, looking at watches and...
I mean, to me, it's simple. It's simpler than sitting there for half an hour, and I'm grateful that my doctor gives me a half an hour. I mean, most patients don't get that. But, yeah, I mean, to just have an impartial, just factual record of what you're experiencing, and to have someone be able to look at that in the graph and say, here are your problem areas, here's where you're having difficult transitions, and then adjust the medication accordingly. Because I answered questions about my typical day, and I didn't say that, but that's the thing. Typical day is managing symptoms, and you do everything else around that. And I can't say it's tiring or exhausting or annoying or frustrating or saddening or maddening or anything. It just is. And again, it's the idea of the fact of it. It just is. So that's my thing I work on all day is how am I going to get to a place that I want to be where I'm comfortable.
Wow, you just said this is what you work on all day.
Yeah.
Is managing your symptoms.
But it's kind of like walking or breathing. It's just a thing that I do, and it's added to my portfolio of what I need to do on a given day.
Another question? Or Tom?
Yeah, my name's Tom. I'm on the mental health team here, and
We need to talk.
we do need to. That's what I wanted to ask you about. Thanks for coming, and for all of you from the foundation. We really appreciate your insights. In addition to the kinds of devices that we work on, we think a lot here about big data and analytics and how to find patterns in very noisy but often important data. Michael, I was impressed by your story about putting the tape on the floor. Almost everything you've talked to us about is ways you found to cope and to deal with this disease so that you can continue to function. And I suspect there are another million people with the same disease who also have tricks that they've found, sometimes even medications that they may have found that they're taking for asthma or for some other problem that surprisingly helps them with their Parkinson's symptoms. Does the foundation have a way of crowdsourcing that information, pulling in from a million people and their families what works, what doesn't, and then people like us can help to make sense of that. Is that something that the foundation thinks about?
Well, you can speak to it programmatically,
yep.
but on a general term, I'll let Todd talk about how we're specifically doing that. But one of the big breakthroughs in this, someone was asking me earlier, but one of the big breakthroughs in the foundation, one of our big breakthroughs was finding a way to incorporate patient involvement and patient knowledge and wisdom and enthusiasm and the fact that it's about these people and so they can help us with what we're trying to do so all those things I find really fascinating when I talk to Parkinson's patients is that we all have different disease. A million of us we have a million different versions of it. We have things that we have difficulty with that someone else may not deal with at all. I mean gastrointestinal stuff is I've never had an issue with that. I've never had an issue with I until recently didn't have an issue with sleeping, but so this back and forth between patients really helps doctors and researchers. And you can talk about.
Yeah, so exactly based on this philosophy, we're in the process of launching, it's just getting started, a project called Fox Insight, which is an online platform for patients to sort of do exactly this, to collect information from as many patients as we can and have them complete surveys and also fill out information to just get more insights in a kind of confined way on this information, and the data will all be made available from that for people to dig into, both surveys and free text and that type of information. So we see this as kind of complementary to the PPMI initiative is a small number of people and really deep, and this would be as many people as we could get, but more sort of superficial kind of information, and then playing those two off of each other to get as much insights as we can.
Another question?
Hi, my name is James. I'm a scientist who also works in the same department with our microbiome expert over here. But to follow up on her question about therapy, it sounds like you and maybe a lot of other Parkinson's sufferers also have a pretty complicated relationship with their therapy that they're taking, their medications. And I'm wondering, is compliance with the therapy or the regimen a challenge that is faced when trying to interpret information coming off a clinical trial or even to manage the disease? And are there solutions that you guys are looking at that might be a way to amend that problem?
So maybe a two-part question. The first for Michael, how difficult is it to manage the medication schedule each day?
Well, it's difficult, but again, it's about someone who's paraplegia has difficulties. I mean, there's all kinds of, everybody gets their own set of issues, and I'm aware of that, and it's how you deal with them. How you deal with them is an individual thing, and so I struggle sometimes with getting it right. For the most part, if I can function and do what I plan to do during the course of a day, that's great. I mean, there are things that, like, I golf, and I'm a terrible golfer. I started golfing in my 40s with Parkinson's, so that's not optimism. I don't know what it is. but I was golfing the other day, and I'll get to put the tee on the ball, and I'll be like there for literally 5 minutes, putting it on and it falls off. I put it on and it falls off. I put it on and it falls off. I adjust the tee, I put it on and it falls off. I put the ball on slower. I get my hand away quicker, it falls off. And there's 3 guys waiting, and it's just fuck them. It's gonna take as long as it takes me to get the ball in the tee, and then I'm gonna swing and hit and miss it twice. So it's hang in. It's a long day. And it's just the way it is. So I do deal with titrating the meds, but it's just the way it is.
I think in general, Parkinson's patients compared to other diseases are pretty compliant with their medicine because they feel the impact of it. It's not like, for example, taking like a high blood pressure pill or an antibiotic. If you forgot to take it, you don't really realize you forgot to take it. Michael will realize if he forgot to take his medicine. His timing may be off, but it's not like he's not taking it at all. So.
Any closing thoughts that you would offer the group today?
I guess just to reiterate our thank you for including us in their grand rounds and for your commitment to Parkinson's disease. And I do think that for us to take the research to the next level, which ultimately the goal is to bring the treatments to the next level, we'll take this new approach of bringing new disciplines into the area, and I think the model here is a great one for the field to be following and integrating, because that will really bring us to the breakthroughs that we want. So thank you for all the work you're doing in Parkinson's.
Thanks, Todd. And Michael, any
I just
closing
wanted
comments?
to say thank you. I mean, thank you so much for your interest and for applying your intellect to our situation, and just for understanding that all I'm here to do, separate from Todd, who can speak about program and science, is to let you know that you're affecting patients, you're affecting people, and then they have my experience is my experience, but they all have their own experience, and yet a common bond between all of us is that we depend on other people, we depend on researchers, we depend on smart, empathetic people that can figure out what we need and help us get there. And I'm grateful for your interest and for your actions.
Well, we're very grateful that you visited us today, and thanks for your inspirational comments.
Thank you.